Hello, everyone, and thanks for listening to The Quality Hub, chatting with ISO experts. I'm your host, Xavier Francis, and today I'm here again with the illustrious Suzanne Strausser, VP of Consulting and Development. Glad you could join us again.
Wow, illustrious.
That's
a word.
It is.
Glad to be here.
Awesome. Suze, you are a regular here. You've been here many times. And today we're going to be talking about startups and ISO 9001. Do you think it's worth it? But before we dig in, let me first ask you a question.
Sure.
If you could go back or forward in time and visit anyone, who would it be?
So let me think about this. If I could go forward, it would probably to see my granddaughter and maybe potential other grandchildren, who knows, and what their families and what their lives have become in the future. That would be super cool.
That would be cool.
Backwards, I think the 1920s in Germany or Paris would have been super fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
Kind of that whole flapper era.
I was going to say the flapper era.
Yeah. Lots going on there.
I think they had fascinators back then too.
Yeah,
so
that too.
The fascinating fascinators.
Yeah.
Oh, the 1920s. Yeah. Well, we're in the 20s, just different century. All right. Well, let's get started and dive right into it.
Sure.
So we're talking about ISO 9001 and startups. So we hear this question a lot. Is ISO 9001 really worth it for startups? And why should they care this early on?
Well, sure, Xavier. I've worked with a number of companies in this position. So for startups, I think ISO 9001 can be a real differentiator. So it's not just about ticking a box.
Mm-hmm.
It's really about putting structure and discipline into your business right from the start.
Okay.
And when you're small, we know this, every mistake counts more, right?
Does.
And you want to get things right early,
Mm-hmm.
whether it's how you manage customer orders or improve your processes or make your first hires.
Mm-hmm.
So early adoption means you're building this strong foundation for future growth. Talk about future, right? And you don't have to go back and fix bad habits later. You'll thank your past self.
Yes, you'll thank your past self.
Yeah.
We're doing the whole thing here.
Yeah.
Or it's like if you had your second child and you just used your first as a,
Right.
What do they say? They're like a first pancake. They come out a little weird.
A little bit.
Something like that.
Yeah. So one practical example is think about bringing your new suppliers on when you're starting out. And a lot can go wrong when you trust the wrong partners.
Okay.
So ISO requires that you have systems in place to vet and then monitor those suppliers.
Right.
And it definitely ensures that you think through the best practices as you set up your operation.
So it's really all about doing it right the first time.
Yes.
Not the second time.
Yep.
Or midway through the first time. Gotcha. Well, that's all pretty clear. Now, what are some of the biggest misconceptions that startups do have about ISO 9001?
Well, yeah, there are a few. First, and I think this is in general, people think ISO 9001 is just for big manufacturers.
Okay.
And we know that that's not true. We talk about that a lot on the show.
Mm-hmm.
But it applies to all kinds of organizations, including, tech, services, even one or two person teams, right? And second, I think there's a fear it's going to drown you in paperwork and bureaucracy, which can happen. But in reality, ISO 9001 is scalable. You can keep it really lean, make it to fit your size. And that's obviously where someone with experience can help, like us, because it's hard to know what the rules are. And finally, some people think it's too soon to worry about quality management in a startup. But honestly, the earlier you embed a quality mindset, the easier everything else becomes as you grow.
Yeah. And that's a great thing that you're looking at it from it is a framework. So it gives you some things to get into those best practices and what you should be doing. And if you're doing it from the start, it's only going to make it easier as you go forward.
I've actually seen this with customers too, where they're not certified yet, but I start to work with them and they have all these practices in place already. And it makes certification very, very easy.
Right. So this is just the reverse way of doing it. Just get the certification or compliance to start with. And then you get that framework in place.
Yes.
All right. So let's get real here with the $1 million question. Does having ISO 9001 make a startup more attractive to investors or even win contracts?
Definitely. We have seen this. So certainly investors love seeing systems in place. They know you're serious about your processes and risk management. But for contracts, ISO 9001 is often a requirement to even be considered or to bid on a project.
Mm-hmm.
And especially with larger clients or government work.
Yeah.
So having that certification can open doors and give you credibility way beyond your size.
You're right. So that's two good reasons.
Yes.
That's just from the monetary standpoint to look at it early when you're starting up. So what about strategy? What are the big picture benefits of adopting ISO 9001 early on? We talked about contracts and getting something in place and maybe investors, but what else?
Well, early adoption helps you build repeatable processes. I think that's one of the most important things.
Mm-hmm.
Then to also make better decisions, smarter decisions with real data.
Okay.
And to respond to customer needs quickly. So you get
Those
everyone.
are all really important.
Absolutely. You get everyone on your team aligned and focus on what really matters.
Mm-hmm.
And as you scale, your foundation's already solid.
Okay.
And so growth doesn't break you. It just gets easier.
Yeah. You're just following the yellow brick road that's already been put in place, maybe, or something like that?
Yeah. Yeah.
That was in the 1920s, wasn't it, when that came out? Going to the whole time travel thing here.
It was actually 1939, but
1939.
We'll let that
Oh, it was so long before I was born. I don't remember.
Same year as Gone with the Wind.
Gone with the Wind, yeah. Well, they both were in color. I know that.
Yep.
All right. So we talked about it a little bit before about best practices, but how can 9001 help a startup build them and even a quality culture right from day one?
Well, ISO 9001 gives you that blueprint for best practices, how to document what matters.
Mm-hmm.
It's up to the business, but still document what is necessary, how to handle issues,
Okay.
How to learn from mistakes, how to continuously improve.
Mm-hmm.
And when you start with that culture, your team sees that quality isn't just a department.
That's a good way to look at it.
It's really how you do business.
Yeah.
And that mindset kind of sticks with your company as it grows.
I like that differentiator where it's like, it's not just a department.
Yeah.
It really is just how we do business. Yep. And I think probably if you're adopting it later, it would be really easy to see it as a department instead of just, This is what we do.
Been there too. Yeah.
You've been there too?
Yep.
Okay. Not in the 20s though.
In my 20s.
In my 20s. Yeah, or in your 20s. My 20s were a whole different animal. But anyway, so let's say you want to get certified. What do you need to have in place?
Yeah, I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about this a little bit because some folks think you can just call a registrar without having any kind of operations in place.
Okay.
And you can't do that.
Okay.
Okay. You have to at least have a product or a service and some customers.
Yeah.
Now, can you do a mock order for 9001 potentially?
Okay.
For other standards, that's not going to fly.
Okay.
Like AS, that's not going to work. But I have seen like a sample order that gets shipped to maybe another partner that you have to have something there to look at the structure.
Something needs to be auditable.
You have to have something auditable. You can't just say, oh, well, we're going to do it this way. That's not going to work.
Yeah, yeah.
So startups do have that issue when they come to us. Sometimes they have to wait a bit before the actual certification until they actually have a product.
But at least they have the stuff in place, the framework in place that they can build off of. Once they get rolling, now you just do the management review, the internal audits, get your certification on it, and there you are.
Yep.
Okay. So it's almost like looking at it maybe from and we talked about this, I believe, with norm, compliance versus certification. You might not be able to be certified until you have something tangible or showable, but you could at least be in compliance at that point.
Yeah, you could have the framework in place.
The framework. Okay.
Yep.
All right. So last question. What advice do you have for startups that might be thinking about implementation, and how can we help at Core?
Well, I would start by understanding what you already do well.
Okay.
Where you have gaps, don't overcomplicate. That's common with any implementation. So don't overcomplicate. Keep your processes simple, meaningful, and get your team involved early on so that everybody buys in.
Okay.
And use the tools that fit your size and style. And obviously, call us.
Yeah, absolutely. That's why we're here.
Yep. So at Core Business Solutions, we really do specialize in guiding startups through 9001 in a way that's practical and sustainable.
Mm-hmm.
And whether it's gap analysis, documentation, initial training, full implementation, we're here to help.
Okay. We absolutely are. I did have a question that just came to mind.
Sure.
What about, let's say a company has already been established. Mm-hmm. They're not 9001, but they're going to open a new branch, not necessarily the product line, but they're actually doing an offshoot. Is that, so it's sort of like a startup.
Yes.
Can you use some of those things maybe from your old business, or does it depend on how separated you are?
Yeah, I've seen this too. So there's a number of ways you can structure that. Mm-hmm. If you wanted to get that other location certified, you could certainly add that to your certificate and then maybe implement some common things.
Okay.
If you have similar processes, you can use some of the same documentation. You can certainly use some of the ISO framework.
Right.
Your manual, your management review process, all those things. Some companies grow and then choose not to get that other location certified, but still want to maintain that compliance.
Gotcha. Gotcha.
Want to include them in the corrective action process, for example, or the customer complaint process. And that's perfectly fine as well. You don't have to get them certified, but it can be like a startup. Yes.
Okay.
Yep.
On the reverse side of that, can you blanket your certification with something that's new like that?
Yeah, absolutely. They would have to be audited.
Okay.
If they're a new site.
Okay. So it doesn't just carry over.
Nope.
You need to do it that way.
It is site specific.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's right. Because part of the scope when they start is looking at, I didn't make that connection until just now.
There you go.
Awesome. Well, this has been great talk. Really good way to look at it for startups, the benefits. There's probably not a lot of downsides other than maybe the time that it would take.
Right.
Which if everything's new and you're not stuck for time to get things rolling, it's probably a really good thing to do.
Yeah. I just think as you're trying to get your business rolling, it's really, really good to get some advice on how to implement things that are these best practices.
Right. So do you have any other place that you'd want to go in time?
Back to the beginning of this podcast and do it better? I don't know.
It's fine. It's great. Lots of great information. Really, really, really appreciate it. Thank you so much for being here today. Again.
Thank you.
And we want to thank everyone who's listened to our podcast today. We hope it's been informative for you. Now, if you're looking for more information about Core Business Solutions, as we now are an LRQA company, and how we can help you with ISO certification, cybersecurity, or even customized training, please email us at info@thecoresolution.com. You can also visit our website at www.thecoresolution.com. And if you haven't already followed us on your favorite podcast platform or YouTube, be sure to do so, and that way you won't miss the next Quality Hub podcast when it's released next week. Have a great day, everyone.